The focus of this video will be the difference between nerves and neurons, and then we'll take a look at the different kinds of neurons and how those are arranged within the nervous system. If you've ever had an opportunity to dissect an animal, you'll have seen a nerve perhaps. Maybe in the earthworm dissection, if you've dissected that, you'll remember seeing along the ventral surface a paired nerve cord. Well, the fact that you can see the nerve suggests right away that that's more than just a single nerve cell, because nerve cells aren't visible to the unaided eye. Let me show you it this way. If this diagram represents a nerve, within that nerve are many neurons, many nerve cells, and let me represent them this way. If each one of these is the cross-section of a nerve cell, and there's clusters of cells in between those nerve cells, but now let me show you, if I take one of these nerve cells and pull it out like that, maybe I'll take another one here and pull it out as well. These two things are individual nerve cells. Correctly called neurons. And therein lies the difference between a nerve and neurons, or nerve cells. A nerve, quite simply, is a bundle of neurons. Within an individual nerve, it's possible that nerve cells can be conducting impulses either way. Let's suppose that this one is conducting a nerve impulse that way, this one's conducting a nerve impulse that way. And let's further suppose that the hand is down here and the spinal cord is up here. This one here would be conducting an impulse from the central nervous system out to the peripheral of the part of the body. And this one would take an impulse from the peripheral part of the body to the central nervous system. Labeled in that fashion, this one would be a motor neuron. Because it quite simply is taking an impulse that's directing movement, perhaps, to the hand. So it's creating some movement within the hand. This one would be a sensory neuron. Where it receives some stimulus in the hand, whether it's pressure or pain or temperature difference, and it takes that message to the central nervous system for processing. These two types of neurons in this part of a nerve look very, very similar. There's no appreciable difference between them. In other parts, these two neurons do look very, very different from each other. If you looked at this even more closely, you would see that these neuron sections, let me try and represent it like this. If this is a neuron section, they're covered with a cellular layer, a protective cellular layer. So let me draw these cells like that. And the parts that I'm going to erase are underneath these other cells. So quite simply, if this is a nerve cell that's conducting an impulse in that direction, it's held apart from another nerve cell that could be conducting an impulse in that direction. They don't come in contact with each other. And we know that nerve impulses are electrical stimuli, so there is no way that these two can affect each other. I'll draw this cellular layer on this cell as well. And I'll erase the bits that aren't visible. These cells which are surrounding these and protecting the impulse, surrounding these fibers, are called Schwann cells. Named after Theodor Schwann, who discovered them in the 1800s in Germany. They're a fatty cell. And they actually start out and grow around these. So in their origin, if you look at this nerve cell in cross-section like this, a young, newly formed Schwann cell covering would start out as this little cell like this, and I'm going to draw it. As it grows, it'll grow around and around and around and around. So the covering could be, as many as 6 layers of fatty cell that are wrapped around and around and around these nerve fibers. These are extremely important. Their importance will be a topic of discussion when we get to how nerve impulses are actually transmitted. So they have multiple functions. The function that is evident here is that they prevent these cells from coming in contact with each other, so that an impulse that's traveling this way in this cell can't affect an impulse traveling that way in that cell. One other little point I can make here is that in between these cells, they don't touch each other. They're very close, but they don't touch each other. These little spots, and here as well, these are called nodes. Nodes of Ranvier. We saw nodes once before already in the circulatory system. There are 2 pieces of nodal tissue in the heart, in the right atrium of the heart. Node is a word that just means spot. So in the heart there's 2 spots. These are the spots in between the Schwann cells. These are also of critical importance for the same reason as the Schwann cells are. So if we can just go back to this, these long fibers here, whether it's a motor neuron or a sensory neuron, a motor neuron or a sensory neuron, they're covered with these Schwann cells, which prevent these cells from communicating with each other. Cells that, or nerves that have these kinds of cells and those kinds of protective features are called mixed nerves. Because they function quite well with nerve impulses going in both directions. Not all nerves in the body are mixed nerves. The optic nerve, for example, only takes impulses from the retina and takes them into the brain for processing. There is no nerve impulse going out an optic nerve. There are impulses going out to the eye because you're allowed to move your eye around, but those are not traveling along the same nerve. Now, obviously, motor neurons and sensory neurons, if they look the same at some point, there must be differences between them at some other point, and that's what I'd like to get to now. I can leave this here for now. I'll use this space and represent a sensory neuron. Let's suppose that the receptor is here, out on the end. Here's the long fiber, the receptor on this end, whatever it looks like. This is the nerve fiber itself, the neuron. It does have a feature along its way here, like that. So there's three parts to it if you think about it. This long part here, the receptor's here, so this is conducting an impulse in that direction. This is called a dendrite. Dendrites are defined as those fibers that conduct impulses towards a cell body. The cell body is the part of the neuron that has the nucleus in it, and it controls nuclear function, or the nerve cell function. These parts here that conduct an impulse out of, or away from the cell body, are called axons. So that's what this might be, but I didn't draw the Schwann cells on it. I can do that. The Schwann cells would cover it like that. And I'm exaggerating this. They're much smaller than that, obviously, and they're maybe closer together than that, but for the sake of my diagram, that's going to work. And these coverings go all the way along. I won't draw them all the way along. Now, a motor neuron, let's suppose that the motor neuron is going to this effector, which could very well be a muscle, or it could be a gland. Something in the body, something in the central nervous system says that you need a secretion from a gland, so it sends a message out to get that secretion, or you have to move, so it sends a message out, so there's some muscle activity. They don't look like this at all. They look more like this, where there's something that is looks more like a squashed bug than anything else, but from that extends the long fiber. And these ones quite often branch because a motor neuron like this could be affecting more than one muscle cell out here. So to put on the Schwann cells, they're like that, all the way along, and I won't go through all of the drawing of that. Now think about it. What's this part of the nerve cell called? In this one, the long part was called a dendrite, or dendrite. Dendrites, as I said, are the ones that conduct impulses from a receptor towards the nerve cell body. In this case, there's no receptor. We do have a nerve cell body here. But this case, this part, the long part, that would be in the mixed nerve, if we're talking about cells that were in a mixed nerve, is conducting an impulse away from the cell body. So by definition, this is the axon. Axons are defined as those parts of the nerve cell that take the impulse away from the cell body. The dendrites in this case are the little bits here. So there's a big difference between this one, which is a sensory neuron, and this one, which is a motor neuron. To summarize the differences, sensory neurons have long dendrites and short axons. Motor neurons have long axons, short dendrites. The nerve cell bodies are different as well. The cell body of this one, of the motor neuron, seems to be more in line with the way the impulse might travel. The cell body of the sensory neuron is off to the side a little bit, and as you'll see in a few minutes, it's actually housed in a certain area just outside the central nervous system called a ganglion. There is one other kind of a nerve cell that we should mention before we get any further, we've got a sensory neuron, a motor neuron, 1, 2, a third type, I'll put its name here, is an interneuron, or an association neuron. And these ones interconnect these other kinds of neurons. So they make associations between sensory and motor neurons, or between motor neurons and motor neurons, as you might find out here coming up. So interneurons are in between. In terms of their appearance, they look more like this, except they may or may not have long axons. It depends on their specific location in the body. So those are the different kinds of nerve cells. Schwann cells, sensory, motor, interneuron. I should say one more thing about Schwann cells. These are a type of glial cell. Glial cells are cells which support neurons. So these cells help the neurons do their job. There's also glial cells called astrocytes that help feed the neurons. There's other cells that help take away the waste from these things, because if you look at these cells, some of them are, as long as my arm is. They're very specialized. It's not possible for these cells to be able to conduct all their life functions by themselves. They have to have the support of glial cells. Now let's put this together and see what we get. I'll erase this. And this. And put this up. And let me explain what we've got here. This here is the spinal cord. Several times now I've mentioned the lumen of the spinal cord has a fluid in it. The fluid's continuous to the brain, and that's what this is right here. That's the lumen of the spinal cord, and it has cerebral spinal fluid in it. This is the spinal cord. You can see it has a right side and a left side. This is the dorsal surface up here. This is the ventral surface here. Now, to give you the orientation, you just look and you imagine a severed spinal cord. The dorsal side is this side, the ventral side is underneath. And you have peripheral nerves coming in. So let's say that this is a sensory neuron taking an impulse in. Its location is as follows. It'll bring the impulse in, there's its cell body, and that's not inside the central nervous system yet. This is the central nervous system here. This is still on the peripheral side. It'll take it in to the central nervous system. So the impulse gets in on a sensory neuron. This is the dendrite. That's the cell body. This is the axon. In the case of a motor neuron, if we're talking about this as being a mixed nerve, we could also have a motor neuron taking an impulse out. The motor neuron comes from the central nervous system. Its cell body is inside here, and it travels out like that. So the mixed nerve with sensory and motor components enters the region of the central nervous system. The sensory neurons go towards a dorsal branch. Motor neurons start in the central nervous system and come out a ventral branch. This branch up here is called the dorsal root. And this little bump along that dorsal root is a dorsal root ganglion. A ganglion refers to nerve cell bodies that are not within the central nervous system. So the sensory neuron has a dorsal root ganglion. There's no such thing on a motor neuron in the somatic nervous system anyways. The interneuron, the one we haven't mentioned anything about yet, is here. So I say they look sort of like a motor neuron. It's got its nerve cell body out here. It's tiny little dendrites there. This would be its axon, the way I've represented it. It takes the nerve impulse from here to here to here to a motor neuron. It makes the connection and back out again. This long process here, I have to mention this again, is the axon. What I've just represented here is a reflex arc. In this particular reflex arc, the sensory information was taken to the central nervous system and hooked up to the motor neuron without any thought process. There was no thinking involved at all. It's reflexive. So, for example, if someone is behind you and very sneakily pings the back of your ear or hits you with a sharp pin or something like that, and you jump, that's a reflexive action. It's a safety measure. You don't even have to think about it. It's the same as if you go and you try and find that sweet spot on your knee so you can tap your knee and your foot kicks up. That's a reflexive action. It's an automatic reaction. At the same time, however, even though those things happen reflexively and you don't think about them, there's another interneuron, and here's the beauty of interneurons, there's another interneuron that'll take that message and it'll take it up to the brain. Because if someone pokes you with a pin or someone hits your knee with a little hammer, you still know what happens. You say, that hurt. So there's still a thought process, but by the time you thought about it, you've already reacted. Reflexive actions, reflex arcs, are a safety feature. That's a defense mechanism. It allows us to respond more quickly. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to process the information, and it's an adaptation, probably originally helps us save our lives. What we haven't looked at yet is how we actually get these impulses to travel. That's the topic of the next video. Thanks very much.